I'm Matt Brownell.
And I'm Van Owens.
And I'm Tim Adams.
Welcome to Climbing the Mountain, where we dive into the scriptures and discuss themes, connections, and real-life application. We're kicking off a series here where we're going to examine the Sermon on the Mount and discuss implications for this teaching for Christians today.
Welcome back to the pod, everyone. Good to talk to you all again. We were talking about the wide and narrow gates. We got a little bit of discussion on true and false prophets. We're going to continue that discussion now. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 through 20. It says, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them."
Thanks. So there are incredible consequences of not bearing good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. How can we resolve the tension between what flows naturally from being a particular type of tree and performance, what fruit we bear?
So with this question, I'm thinking about like where it takes me is, are people just bound to be a certain way, or do we have some sort of influence on that? Is that kind of the direction that you're wondering about?
Yes, I'm wondering how can we resolve, I think there is a tension between performance, what you have within your strength to do, and what flows out from you naturally, maybe through the Spirit or through how God has made you, or what? Like, how do we resolve the dependence on God and what is within our grasp?
Yeah, that is where it kind of comes back to what we were talking about at last episode a bit. Like, some people just seem like, man, you're just a great person. Like,
You're a good dude.
And it's just easy for you. And then other people, it's like, oh, I can really see you're trying, and it is hard to be around you. Like,
We're not going to name names. Yeah, I do think there are a lot of good people, and I'm certainly painting with broad strokes, but when you get to know them, there's some stuff in their life that isn't quite as rosy as it may look, and that doesn't make them certain aspects not good, but it does mean that there's certain aspects where everybody's falling short, including the people who are really trying very, very hard. I actually, when I read this question, I don't actually think there's tension between what flows from us, because even if it flows naturally from just who we default are, that's a thing that God's made good, that God's built into us. And performance, because I don't think we tend to have a correct view of fruit. I think we tend to view fruit as spiritual productivity, as like, that's great, you're doing this. What did you? And we view fruit on a very short time frame. And I think it was Tim last time said that sometimes fruit can take decades to bear. Like, sometimes you say, well, we're not bearing any fruit. Well, sometimes the fruit, it could take 80 years. Like, I think of Jacob's life. It took him till he was an old man, till when I studied his life to go, oh, that's a really good, faithful decision. Like, everything up till then was kind of like, I've used the phrase sketchy used car salesman to describe him. And I'm sticking with that. You can get me off.
Yeah, I hear you.
If you want to try to get me off of that, we can do that offline. But But so I think we tend to have a wrong view of fruit. And because we have a wrong view of fruit, we go, well, we need to produce this type of fruit. Not that that type is wrong, but it's incomplete. And you have to do it within this amount of time.
Yeah.
Not always well defined, but we have this thing in our heads where it's like, you have to produce this in this time or you're not a good tree. Whereas Jesus isn't saying that. And a lot of the fruit he's talked about and a lot of the fruit he's referencing is softer. It's, what does your life look like? I would say a good test of this is, what would random stranger walks into your home, if you have a family, what would they see? What's the fruit of your life?
Yeah.
Is it, and I think we've all walked into a house where you can cut the tension with a knife and you just go like, what's going to happen next? Who's going to blow a gasket? And you're just like, I want to get out of here. That's fruit that you're producing.
Yeah.
But it's obviously not good fruit. And so, but the fruit of the person, of the family that's, you walk into their home and you feel, I'm at peace. I'm welcome here. I'm safe here. I can let my guard down. It's hard to measure that.
Yeah.
But you know it
It's a
when you
feeling.
see it. It's tangible. It's just not measurable. And so I think a lot of the times, if our lives are producing division, stress, anxiety, we probably have an issue with us. If that's what's being produced around us, if they're producing peace, safety, kindness, openness, then we're probably being a good tree. But the other thing to note is the problem is not, we're not producing enough fruit. The problem's the health of the tree.
Yeah.
You can't fix the fruit. You can heal a tree.
I think that the analogy of fruit is such a powerful one to me. Now, let me preface this by saying I don't know very much at all about agriculture. What I do know, though, is in my neighborhood growing up, which was in inner city Boston, but interestingly, there was a guy who had some property right outside the park where we used to play, and he grew fruit trees. And we used to climb his fence and steal his fruit, and we were bad kids. But the work that it takes to get a tree to bear fruit is intense. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fertilizing and pruning, and you have to be careful of what kind of sunlight the tree gets. And it does take years to get a tree that's mature enough to produce fruit that you'll want to eat. And I think that the tree bearing fruit, with all the work that's involved in that, you still need sunlight, rain, and good soil.
Yeah.
And that stuff, I mean, you can make soil better, I guess, by fertilizing it, but you can't grow banana trees in Massachusetts. It won't work. That tree is never going to bear fruit. And I always think, what I'm thinking about is, when I'm thinking about performance, I think, how am I working? Am I working according to God's plan? Or am I just trying to muscle my way into something that's going to make me feel better? It always reminds me of in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 31, it says, the mighty man will become tinder and his work a spark.
Wow.
Both will burn together with no one to quench the fire. And so and I think when I'm just completely focused on my performance, on how I look, so the fruit that I'm going for, Jim, is I want to look like I've got it together. I want to look like my life is in line. I want to look like my marriage is perfect. I want to look like my kids are raised right. I want to look all these things. And when I focus on just that, what I'm focusing on is fruit that it's pretty, but it doesn't taste good. It's not nourishing.
Yeah.
And that work is this kind of Isaiah 131 work. It's that work that I'm trying to be a mighty man. I'm trying to look like a mighty man. But all that's going to do is burn me up in the end. I'm going to burn up. I'm going to burn out because I'm not working according to God's plan. I'm not producing the kind of fruit that he intends for me to produce.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I think all of your responses are very helpful. I wanted to ask this because I think, especially when I was first reading chapter 7, it freaked me out because in my base nature, I am performance driven, and I have a deep need to achieve and I think part of it is I get my sense of worth from my achievements, which is such a bad trap to get into. But seeing that this is fruit that takes time to develop, that is largely out of my control in terms of like the right, soil, sunlight, water. It reminds me that this is a work that is done in us through Jesus. And it reminds me a lot of John 15 and the vine and branches. And I mentioned Psalm 1 before, and the tree that's planted by streams of water. It's planted next to a stream of water. Oh, cool. It's got a constant support structure, and it's going to produce its fruit in season. And but the John 15, Jesus actually says, apart from him, we can do nothing. The point is that we, as a branch, just need to remain in him and he in us, and then the fruit will come. And it's taken me years to see some of the things that that needed to change, let alone begin to see any change in some of these things. Anyway.
No, it's a hard, we are, because we are in America, we are performance oriented. You are what you perform. And Jesus is not saying that. He's just saying what your life produces, not how much money you produce, but some of the softer things like we've talked about, like the kindness, the peace, the patience, I can walk into my home, you can walk into a home and there's peace, there's safety, there's comfort. You feel welcome. Not they say welcome, but you feel welcome, like they want you there. That's I think what Jesus is going for. We're gonna wrap this section up, and we might even get to the next section.
Crazy.
I know. And we've touched on this, but what is Jesus more concerned with? Is he more concerned with us getting every doctrinal detail right? Or is he more concerned with us simply living the right way, specifically treating people the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I think in our minds, coming out of like the Reformation or not so much the Reformation, but the Enlightenment, like there is this big difference between doctrine and your life. I think the lines are a lot more blurry in the scriptures. And the way I kind of have been simplifying a lot of these thoughts for me is what I think I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, but it's just like what's important about my journey is what's happening, what's happening in my life. That shows, in some ways that shows my doctrine, right? Also the doctrine that I believe and subscribe to influences and shapes those things. But it's if I'm not living out the golden rule, like I got the wrong doctrine and I got the wrong life,
Yeah.
So I think that the fallacy this is, I guess, the way of summarizing it. The fallacy is that there is any sort of perfect doctrine that doesn't have an impact on your life.
Yeah.
The doctrine's still really important.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
the if there's no meaningful effect that can be seen, then it's not the way of life that Jesus is laying out.
Yeah. And I love that you said you can't decouple the two. I mean, as a thought experiment, you can.
Yeah.
But in our real lives, you can't decouple what we believe from how we live.
That's right. And I think there's something more to this too. Staying on that for a sec, people form a lot of doctrines. Doctrine is just teaching, and so people have a lot of different ways that they organize their life. And the Bible is one of those organization methods, building your life on Christ, which is something we'll talk about more. But people have philosophy. People have, I think society plays a huge role. I think we live in the United States where individualism is prized. And so having a sense of I've done this, I've accomplished this. So that may seem perfectly fine to you because you're surrounded again. There are a lot of broad paths around us, and they're deceptive because so many people are on them. You just kind of take for granted. Oh yeah, I pull myself up by my bootstraps. I've accomplished this. I've done that. And really, we're a lot more a product of, hey, you were born at this time in this place. If you'd been born in the 12th century in the Himalayas, none of this. Okay, forget it. I don't know. I think that there's a larger piece to this where I think we can't forget that we are completely dependent upon God. Mm-hmm. And so having the right doctrine and life flows from both are important, but if we're not in Christ and importantly, if he is not our savior, because I think that's what this is teaching, this whole section that we really, none of us are good enough and none of us are right enough, and that we need God.
Yeah, I think that I think that is, and maybe it's an American mindset that, well, it's not because this wasn't written in America, but it's a human mindset to want to separate doctrine and life. And I think the sort of the bottom line that I don't think any of us would disagree with is that your doctrine is not perfect if you're not living right. Mm-hmm. And you're not living right if your doctrine is wrong. That those two things they can't separate.
Yeah.
And I think of, is it in 1 Corinthians where it says, knowledge, what you know, what does that do for you? It puffs you up. Unless you have love, because love is what builds you up. And so I think of knowledge as something you can have and hold on to and think, this is right, this is good, this is what I know. And sort of convince yourself that it's what you are, even though you just know it and you're not living. And if you're doing that, then the best you can be is puffed up. Mm-hmm. You're a balloon. That's the best you can be if that's all you have. But love, which is that doctrine put into practice and displayed, and in the way that you treat people as you yourself would want to be treated, golden rule again, love is what builds you up. Love is what makes you a solid individual.
No, that's good. Good stuff. Let's fulfill Torah,
Right?
not abolish.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Fulfill by living it out correctly.
Should we read the next couple of verses? I think we got time for maybe a question.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to read verses 21 through 23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.
All right, so we have verse 22 here. It seems to be saying that these Lord, Lord saying people, they're doing some good things. They're casting out demons. They're prophesying. That's good stuff, right? Why does Jesus refer to them as evildoers? What evil are they doing?
This passage freaked me out the first time I read it.
Just the first?
No, you're right.
Man.
Try every time.
Yeah, it still gets me. I think it flows from the previous passage, and where the previous section asked us to consider the life and doctrine of our leaders and ourselves, the fruit we bear. This next one asks us to consider something more, I think. First, Jesus contrasts the sayer, the one who's saying, Lord, Lord, with the doer, who's working miracles. Then he goes further with the doer and says, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Evildoers? Aren't they performing miracles in your name, Jesus? I mean, literally evildoers? And I think what that word is actually saying is lawbreakers or workers of lawlessness. What Jesus is saying here, I think first, I think it feels like he's saying it's not just what you say, but what you do. And then he seems to say it's not just what you do, you don't do it well enough, or you're evil. You're straight up evil. Even your good deeds stink. You can never be good enough. So I think you're left with like this. When I first read it, I was like, what hope do I have? And the performance side of me freaked out. And how can we ever be good enough in words and deeds? What's our hope? And I think what this drives us to see is our only hope is found in Jesus, to be clothed in him and be seen with his perfect righteousness. And I think, this continues, just as it stunned me when I first read it as a deeply religious perfectionistic person, which is a pretty bad combination. It scared me.
Perfectionistic a word? We'll look that up.
Oh man, if it's not, then
you're not.
I'm not perfect. Shoot. Anyway, it's a bad combo nonetheless, and it scared me, and it made me desperate for Jesus.
So I think, Matt, I appreciate what you said, especially coming from the perfectionist, religious side of things, where you hear that. I think the more I read this, the more I can hear that and go, wait, they're doing all the good things that they're supposed to do. Why are they not good enough? And then I reread this a few times and I went, Jesus only mentions two things, which I think is interesting. He says, you're casting out demons and we're like performing miracles.
And prophesying.
And prophesying in his three things, sorry. So they're doing these things, but then I kind of looked back through like what was God looking for from people throughout the story, right? Not just like in this thing, because we love all three of those, right? We love miracles. We love prophesying. We love casting out demons. That's kind of a thing that we view. My personal conviction is that from the beginning, God has been looking for people to partner with him to heal a broken world. He hasn't necessarily been looking for people to put on a show. He said, come walk with me, come know me. We'll work together to heal a broken world. And like, I hear all these things. I see casting out demons. Like if a demon's cast out of you, that's a good thing. But you're not ultimately healing the person. You have to actually now walk with the person. Like it's the demon's out, you're back to zero, whereas you were like negative. But now we have to get you working back. Now we have to get you off of zero. I think of like prophesying. Prophesying's good. It's nothing wrong with it, but it's not healing the brokenness that's prevalent in the world. And I think that's what these people are missing. They're doing the showy religious things. They're doing the mighty spiritual acts, but they're not partnering with God to heal. And God is really looking to heal people more than he's looking to put on a show. And that healing, as I think I'm pretty sure we've all experienced, the healing's not in the mighty spiritual acts. It's in the day-to-day walking. It's not in the like thing we do once and everybody goes, wow. It's in the quiet moments where we have small choices to make and where we have to struggle to choose the right thing. It's when we have opportunities that we have to say yes or no to. It's in the little things. And it doesn't it reads like these people were missing that. And so I think I tend to read this less of a, what hope do we have, and more of a, we have to reorient what we think is important to God. Because we make a lot of decisions on how we act and what we do based on what we think is important without actually considering what's important. So maybe we need to change our baseline that these things aren't as important to God as we think they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, when you look at Jesus' ministry, these were some of the big things he was doing, right? And and then over and over in John, he'll be like, hey, look at what I'm doing. Like, these things testify about me.
Yeah.
Especially the miracles, right? These works testify about me.
He calls them signs.
Yeah. But then also, like, people will be like, hey, do the thing. And he's like, nah.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Right.
I'm not a monkey that dances for you.
Yeah. And like, he warns that people are going to come who can deceive because maybe they're doing some of these things, but they're not walking with him. That's some of the warning here, I think. Some of the warning about the false prophets. There's stuff later in Matthew and Luke. It says like some people could deceive even the elect, right? Because they can do all these incredible things. So yeah, I think the misplaced priorities is a great way of thinking about it, Jim. But I think it's helpful for me to think about this passage. Well, one of the things beyond what you just said, Jim, is that if I see, these things present or absent, in a particular circle, it doesn't necessarily mean something about, that person or that circle of people, right? Just because I see miracles being performed somewhere doesn't mean I can like rubber stamp everything else.
It's a great way to put it. Yeah.
That's I think, yeah, it is a different mindset, right, about what's important. That I've definitely had a hard time with at different points being like, oh, like, why don't I see X why don't I see miracles often in my day-to-day life? Does that mean something's missing? Or like, why am I seeing this people driving out demons over here in this branch of Christianity? Right. Like, does that mean that everything that branch believes is true? And this is kind of like, well, there's things to be learn from all of those discussions, but it's not like the essence of knowing Jesus, which is the point.
Yeah. I think through different points in my life, my wife has frequently prayed for a miracle. And I don't come from as much of a Christian background as the rest of you. And I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, I hope God performs a miracle here. From what I've seen, usually the quote unquote miracle we're praying for is just a lot of walking. It's like staying on the narrow road long enough for God to work through us and for something to happen. I mean, it's simply staying in it long enough is the miracle.
Yeah.
Well, that is one. I do think we see in like James 5 that he calls us to pray for miraculous.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I think a lot of the times we say, "God, can you just do a miracle?" And God's like, "Just stay walking."
Yeah, the miracle
happen.
may just be like that. May not be the thing that you need because He knows what's best too. So He may say, "No, that's not actually. That's actually if I did this for you, that would be a stone or a snake."
Yeah. think we have to
We
cut
gotta-
this
we
one
gotta-
short.
yeah, we gotta continue.
Short in air quotes. So this is a great discussion. We're gonna keep this going. We're gonna pick it up next pod. Thank you guys for listening.
Awesome.